For 20 years, Roman Abramovich considered his possessions in London absolutely safe from access. For the 55-year-old, like so many other super-rich Russians of the post-Soviet era, the Thames city was an unassailable treasury, a stronghold. Now, however, since Russia invaded Ukraine, Londongrad's most prominent oligarch can't get rid of his real estate and businesses fast enough. Abramovich is now rushing to sell his London football club Chelsea FC. The sale is expected to bring £3 billion. The club is ready to write off the 1.5 million debt that the club owes to Abramovich. The main thing is that the whole thing runs in record time without delay. At the same time, Abramovich also seems to have put other of his objects on the market, such as his stately home in Kensington Palace Gardens, near Kensington Palace, which is now said to be worth £150 million, as well as various luxury apartments. As for Chelsea, the proceeds from the sale are said to go to victims of the war in Ukraine as a charitable donation. We'll see if that's true. It's not only Abramovich who has been visibly panicked by the consequences of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The publisher of the London Evening Standard, Evgeny Lebedev, he also fears, like his compatriot, that the origin of his fortune could be his undoing. This week, on the front page of the Standard, Lebedev wrote in giant letters an urgent request to the Russian president to bring this terrible conflict to an end. A number of other oligarchs with commercial interests in London have also expressed their desperate hope that the fighting will end soon, without ever criticizing Putin directly. Billionaires like Mikhail Friedman, one of Russia's richest men with substantial properties in London, suddenly find themselves under enormous pressure. Late on Thursday evening, it became known that the government, in Alisher Usmanov, had put an oligarch on the sanctions list for the first time who has property and probably a permanent residence in Great Britain. Nowhere is Russian capital more concentrated than in the British capital, which has given London the nickname Londongrad or Moscow on the Thames. According to the London Times, wealthy Russians have been investing more than £27 billion in Britain and specifically in London. According to the anti-corruption campaign Transparency International, at least £1.5 billion of this will go to oligarchs closely linked to the Kremlin or accused of corrupt practices. And that, experts say, is just the tip of the iceberg, because behind such purchases are often opaque companies that operate from tax havens and whose commercial maneuvers are still difficult to examine today. For decades, governments in London have resisted control reforms which politicians of all parties have increasingly been calling for. In particular, the Conservatives have repeatedly been accused of never having any real interest in taking action against the oligarchs. Since Boris Johnson took office alone, the Tories have reportedly received £2 million in donations from Russian sources. Only now, since the Ukraine shock, have stricter rules become a central issue in British politics. Secretary of State Liz Truss vowed this week that she was preparing a tough hit list against oligarchs. No loophole will be available to rich businessmen from the East for laundering and investing dirty money. Such rhetoric has understandably contributed to the nervousness in Londongrad. But how long it will take to take appropriate sanctions against individuals in London remains to be seen. The Foreign Office has heard that top law firms acting on behalf of the super-rich have threatened to sue the British government for millions if it tortures clients without evidence of unlawful conduct. Journalists who try to get oligarchs closer to Putin are now threatened with expensive lawsuits. In this situation, Foreign Office officials have conceded that it could be weeks or even months before Russian oligarchs can be prosecuted. The opposition Labour Party has complained that it is a complete joke that London wants to give the oligarchs 18 months to disclose their involvement in hitherto opaque deals. That should be done in 28 days, said Sir Keir Starmer, the party leader. Why are we giving Putin's cronies 18 months to calmly get their possessions out of our country's real estate market and into a new safe haven to ship them to a new safe haven? Government officials also concede behind the scenes that there is a very considerable risk of capital flight. All of this, warned Tobias Ellwood, the Tory chairman of the Defence Committee in Westminster, must be done within days, not weeks or months, before the money is all gone. Meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats' domestic policy spokesman, Alistair Carmichael, has recommended what he considers an extremely simple solution: It's high time to freeze all these possessions and put them to good use, he said. For example, Ukrainian refugees who escaped this terrible war could be housed in confiscated English oligarch castles. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.